Good evening. It's B again. I think I really like this new microphone, and we're going to stick with it for a while. If you do like it, give us a thumbs up for these next couple of videos. If you don't, thumbs down. And give us a comment letting us know what you liked more, what you haven't liked. Just, give us some feedback if you would. This next spooky story is actually something that I've mentioned before. It's a 7-part series that we will be releasing over the next couple weeks. And it's also from Our No Sleep. The title is I Found My Old Copy of My Favorite Childhood Movie. Something's seriously wrong with it. It's by Dopa Bean. Let's begin. I was never into Disney. Don't get me wrong, I love animated films, and I appreciate The Lion King as much as anybody, but I've always found Disney to be too straightforward, too simple. Instead, I love what my mom unfairly calls off-brand cartoon movies, particularly Don Bluth films. All Dogs Go to Heaven was my all-time favorite. Then there's The Land Before Time, A Troll in Central Park, The Secret of NIMH, and even Rock-a-Doodle. I'm not saying they're objectively better than Disney, but I prefer them. My appreciation for these animated movies comes in handy at my new job. I'm a home health aide for adults with disabilities. My clients are considered violent and dangerous, but I haven't encountered a serious situation yet. Other aides have been pinned to the ground, beat up, slashed with broken glass, and more. I only started in January, though, so I'm sure my time will come. I spend most of my time with 2 clients, Caroline and Mark. They aren't related, and in fact, Mark can't stand Caroline. I'm still not sure why the company put them in the same house. Mark is very difficult. Caroline can be, but she's only been sweet towards me. She had a horrific childhood, and in addition to serious mental disabilities, she suffers heavily from PTSD. She comes off as deceptively extroverted, but has trouble speaking intelligibly, and gets hostile when caregivers can't understand her. For some reason, though, I've never had trouble deciphering her words. I guess that's why she grew attached to me so fast. On my very first day, she pulled me aside and insisted I put her Secret of NIMH VHS in the player. I couldn't help but notice it was in bad shape. So were the rest of her tapes. It's not her fault. She takes excellent care of them, but years of constant use and endless humidity have taken their toll. That means she likes you, Jesse told me. As the main assignee to the house, he's been tasked with training me. He's 3 years younger than me, but took this job right out of high school and has never left. We're very lucky to have him. He's always calm, kind, and on top of everything, even though this type of work is notorious for employee burnout. As Caroline and I watched NIMH, the constant static, fuzz, and frame flipping made me wince. And all of her tapes were like that. None played well, and few had anything approaching a watchable picture. I pulled Jesse aside at the end of my shift and asked him if I could buy Caroline more movies. It's against the rules to just give them stuff, he said. But maybe we can get an exception. I'll ask. Mark ambled over, planted himself in front of us, and stared. He was allowed, of course. It was his house, after all. Hey, Mark, Jesse said. Want to join us? No, Mark spat contemptuously, looking disgusted. What are you really doing? Are you gonna fuck? Nah, Never on the clock, man, Jessie answered. Mark looked puzzled for a second, then grinned. That was funny, dude. His smile dissipated into a critical sneer. Leave some room for Jesus, guys. Then stormed away. To give an idea of what it's like to work with Mark, let's just say that that's the least offensive interaction I've ever had with him. I know it's unkind, but that's why I prefer working with Caroline. I grew close to her quickly, which made me even more eager to replace her movie collection. Jessie did clarify the gift-giving rules for me. Sure enough, staff members cannot give presents to clients. Christmas and birthdays are exceptions, but the gifts have to be approved by the program director. Jessie took the initiative and got the approval. I was hired after Christmas, but Caroline's birthday is tomorrow. So, for the last couple months, Jessie and I have slowly collected replacements for her videos. Between yard sales, Amazon, and eBay, we ended up with a huge haul. I even dug up my old copy of All Dogs Go to Heaven out of storage for her. Altogether, everything cost less than $40. We wanted to make sure the tapes were in good shape before giving them to her. So, rather than watch them alone, because, seriously, nothing is as lonely and melancholy as watching kid movies by yourself, Jessie and I scheduled movie nights. For several weeks now, we've been watching 3 or 4 of these animated movies every Thursday, which is our shared night off. So far, everything's good. The tapes all play as well as VHS tapes can. No one recorded over the films with home movies or amateur porn. Revisiting childhood favorites with a friend is fun, and I really like spending time with Jessie. He's the kindest, calmest person I've ever met. Yesterday was our last movie night before Caroline's birthday. We only had 2 films left, Anastasia and All Dogs Go to Heaven, which I sentimentally left for last. But Jessie picked up a double overtime shift, so we started really late. He refused to cancel on me and arrived just after 9 p.m., looking exhausted. His tiredness was catching. We made it through the first movie, but he nodded off about halfway through the second, and at some point I followed suit. After a while, I blinked awake. It felt like hours had passed, but the movie was still playing. And there was something wrong with it. It was supposed to be All Dogs Go to Heaven. Like I said, it's my absolute favorite. I have it memorized. And this is my copy. I pulled it out of my mom's garage myself just a couple weeks ago. But whatever I was watching wasn't that movie. It wasn't anything I've ever seen. The animation and style was right. Deep, dreamy watercolors, 100 different kinds of soft light, rich and gentle, like a moving painting. But everything else was all wrong. For one thing, a cartoon version of Caroline filled the screen. It wasn't the clumsy, painfully overweight Caroline I know, the one who talks like a baby and wears dirty clothes and throws house-quaking tantrums if the macaroni and cheese isn't the exact right color. It was toddler Caroline, tiny and golden, apple-cheeked with mismatched eyes, one like a vast blue pool, the other a deep, warm hazel. She wore overalls and had her blonde hair tied in chunky little ponytails. She was the perfect cartoon baby girl. She wasn't alone. In this film, there was also a man. He looked sad and mean. His head was overly large, dominated by Elmer Fudd eyes. Underneath those eyes was a downturned, dark red mouth. White clown makeup caked his face, along with thick eyeliner and long, painted lashes. Caroline and the man were in a sinister, bare square of a room, with brown carpet and a single lamp that emitted ominous yellow light. A small bed sat in the corner. while baby Caroline gurgled happily and played with blocks. The man lay on the bed. His face was buried in the bedding. A single long-lashed eye peeked out. He held so still that I thought he was dead, until I noticed the tears streaming down his face. He finally sat up, leaving a thick mask of makeup caked onto the pillow. Without the makeup, his face was hideous and pathetic. He looked at Caroline, this little clown man with the huge head and mean eyes, as fat cartoon tears dripped down his face. Then an awful, ridiculous smile stretched slowly, spreading all the way to his ears. He radiated hatred and a sheer, overwhelming sickness. His hate didn't burn, it pushed. The magnitude of it seemed to shove violently through the screen with a paralytic force. And somehow, in the nonsensical way of dreams, his hatred propelled him across that terrible little bedroom, all the way to baby Caroline, playing happily with her baby blocks. Caroline looked up when his shadow fell across her. Gentle cooing died in her throat as he leaned down, face split nearly in half by an absurdly ugly leer. I scrambled for the remote and shut the TV off just as her big blue eyes went horrifically wide. Jessie jerked awake as the room went dark, mumbling a series of apologies. "It's okay." My voice shook. The odd tone cut through his sleepiness, and he looked at me sharply. I could practically see the question swirling in his head. I turned the movie off. It's messed up. Worse than the tapes she has now. "That's too bad," he said. "Are you okay?" Yeah, I jabbered. Just gave me a little bit of a shock. He watched me for a moment longer, then stifled a yawn. "You should probably go home," I said. "You had a long day. You don't need to worry about this too." I wanted him to go. Needed him to disappear while I figured out what to do with that tape. It was still running. The timer kept ticking by on the VCR display. I prayed he wouldn't notice. He obviously sensed something was wrong because he didn't want to go. Luckily for me, he was exhausted, so he gave in and left pretty quickly. Once I was alone, the apartment felt cold, empty, and far too big. The VCR was still running. I stared at it, trying to figure out what I'd just seen. Maybe the tape was just a terrible joke. The resemblance to Caroline nothing but a coincidence. It's easy to spoof old-school animation these days. The simplest, most rational explanation was that some sick fuck had made his own disgusting cartoon porn, distributed it somehow, either on accident or to purposely mess with people's heads. On impulse, to put my mind on ease, to conquer my fear, and most of all to calm down, I turned the TV on. No more Caroline, thankfully, but it was playing another unfamiliar animated film. The familiar, dreamy color palette composed an idyllic scene. A dark-haired boy sitting on the edge of a lake. It was sunset. The world burned gold and orange and gentle red, contrasting with the stark black shadows of trees and hills and a small house across the water. I knew this boy too. He was a lot older than Caroline, 10, maybe even more, but slight and rangy, with prominent bones and hollow cheeks. A short, brutal-looking scar marred the top of his cheekbone. That scar, that face, and of course his hair, overly long, falling in ragged waves nearly to his shoulders, were instantly recognizable. It was Jessie. He leaned down and traced his fingers through the water. Circles fanned out, slowly spreading to the other end of the lake. When the last ripple hit the opposite shore, the scene shifted back to Jessie, right as a pair of overlarge hands slid onto his shoulders. His face hardened for a moment, then became disturbingly blank. He stood and followed the newcomer into the trees. In a clearing, all rendered in lush pastels and rich painted hues, was a small, horrifically dismembered body. Little Jessie choked, turned, and threw up, spraying the grass with vomit. The corpse was in tatters, rib cage split open like an oven roast under a face that had been peeled of flesh. A single green eye, already clouding up, peered blindly at the canopy overhead. Little Jessie tried to run, but the killer caught him by the arm, twisting savagely, and dragged him back to the body. I couldn't take it anymore and shut the TV off again. It's gotta be a joke or a mix-up. Nothing else makes sense. Cursed videotapes are bullshit in the first place, but cursed, ridiculously awful tapes about people I know? Come on. It's a sick, stupid prank. But it's getting to me just the same. I had nightmares about cartoon Caroline all night. The nightmare was an exact replica of the film and continued long past the point where I turned it off in real life. I woke up in a sweat and went back to sleep, but I had the nightmare a second time. I'm stupid, so I tried to go to sleep one last time and of course suffered a third replay of the nightmare. I woke up for good at 4 a.m. and I haven't gone back to sleep since. I called into work today. It was shitty, but I'm exhausted and afraid to be around Caroline. Seeing Jesse also scares me. He's too perceptive and bullheaded when he wants to be. He already knows something's wrong. I don't want to deal with his questions. I did destroy the video, tore out all the tape, shoved everything in the trash, and dropped it in the communal dumpster. So, at least it's gone. I hope the nightmare follows suit. Tomorrow is Caroline's party, so I'll go into work no matter how sick or freaked out I am. But I'm not looking forward to it. I can't stomach the thought of animated movies right now, but I already know she's going to be watching them all day long. So that was part 1 of this 7-part series. Like I said earlier, if you enjoyed this, feel free to give us a like. If you're excited for the rest of the series, give us a comment, and be sure to subscribe because we'll be having videos out with our new schedule every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in the afternoons and evenings. I hope you enjoyed this. This has been me, B. Have a good evening, and stay spooky.